Why did we go after resources in space? Well, why did we go to space? Why did we start exploring space? But not necessarily for resources.
Where the Chinese or the Americans might place their base on the moon.
Interesting enough, the moon is big, and you see it every night. But just like on Earth, there's prime real estate. We are all talking about the moon, but the asteroids hold important resources. They also have water. They also have some metals that are important. Solar energy can not just power a spacecraft, but think about if you can collect that energy in orbit and beam it down to Earth to give us 24/7, no worry about clouds.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time to join what I think is going to be a super important conversation with somebody who knows everything there is to know about space resources. It is Abbud-Madrid, who is the director for the Center of Space Resources at the Colorado School of Mines. Now, the Colorado School of Mines has got a brilliant name when it comes to space resources. And I'm just going to spend a tiny bit of time. It's not just a tiny bit of time, actually, because what you've done is so vast. I'll take a couple of minutes to talk about you. You lead the research program, which is focused on human and robotic exploration of space and the utilization of its resources. You're also the director of the Space Resources Graduate Program, which is aimed at scientists, engineers, economists, entrepreneurs, and policymakers. We're going to come into that in the field of extraterrestrial resources. More than 35 years experience in space projects, including low gravity airplanes, the space shuttle, the International Space Station, and lunar and planetary missions. In 2004, you got the NASA Astronaut's Personal Achievement Award for your contributions to human spaceflight. You're president of the Space Resources Roundtable, which is very, very famous, an international organization. It brings together all interested parties to discuss many aspects of space, lunar, asteroid, planetary resources. 2018, you were appointed as observer and technical panel member of the Hague International Space Resources Governance Working Group. I'm coming up for breath now. In 2020, member of the Committee on Planetary Protection of the US National Academies of Science, Engineering and Medicine. You're also editor-in-chief of the Space and Planetary Resources Journal by Springer. You have many other things. Your private pilot license as well for single engine airplanes. I know you don't sleep because I know when I receive your emails, I wish I had your stamina, but my God, we're lucky to have somebody like you doing what you do.
It is a pleasure, Lisa.
I'm so happy that you've given me your time, because if there's one person who can bring together all of these different aspects of what space resources means, I think you are definitely one of the very, very few people in the world who can do that. And you bring it together already in the Colorado School of Mines. And you also reflect to me why I think it is so important for a normal person, whatever a normal person is, or even somebody who is a deep expert in the field of space in one capacity, to try to get an umbrella picture. And that is what you do, apart from your also deep expertise. So, okay, I'm going to just say it. Why should we care about space resources?
Excellent question. And one that before we actually start talking about space and future, it is important to understand why resources are important in a planet that we all know very well, which is planet Earth. As you know, since the very beginning of times when humans started leaving Africa to Europe, Asia, and all that, resources were key for their survival. And through our history, through our agriculture, and then going after gold and silver, then later on oil and rare earth, and lately even lithium, resources have been the driving force behind exploration, but also the means to do so. They also have allowed us to live off the land in extreme environments, and they have become the main engine of our technological society. We depend on them for whatever we do. Look around us. If it's not grown, it's mined or it's extracted. And so it is very important to understand why resources are important here on Earth, and they will be in space too. Why did we go after resources in space? Well, why did we go to space? Why did we start exploring space? It was not necessarily for resources. It was about, in the 1960s, the Soviet Union and the United States trying to show their technological superiority. But something happened on our way to heaven, Lisa. In any human activity that starts out of curiosity or scientific inquiry, we realize that space had value, that could be useful to us. And without noticing it, we have become increasingly connected to our resources and assets for everything we do. Think about weather forecast. Think about how we can pinpoint every location of the Earth with extreme accuracy. I turn on this phone, I know exactly where I am. My time is synced by space. We use it to monitor the health of our planet. So we have become so connected to space that I would venture to say that we remove our space assets, that will bring civilization to its knees.
Well, that is a different problem when it comes to warfare, because there is the potential militarization of space. In
Sure.
fact, used in both ways, for defense, which is the other side of militarization.
Sure. And resources on Earth have been the same thing.
And have been.
And have been. It's always I would say that every battle, every war that we have conducted, it's about resources. You may paint it as political, and eventually it's about, because it's our survival. This is a human nature thing. And in space, you start to see the same thing. At first, in fact, we went into space because of the competition between superpowers. But we realized about the very first resource in space, and this is sometimes people associate resources with mining things. Location, just being out there and be able to have satellite communication that gives us all of these things that we depend on, that's a big resource. And one that is in the billions of dollars per year. But once you start thinking, well, what's next? What other resources can we use other than location? Well, you have things that are even intangible. Solar energy. Solar energy can not just power a spacecraft, but think about if you can collect that energy in orbit and beam it down to Earth to give us 24/7, no worry about clouds, beam at one point without clustering the whole planet with the solar panels. That will solve a lot of our energy issues.
How close are we to that being a possibility?
That has been a dream for like 50 years. In the last few years, because of technology developments, like always happens, China, for example, has been conducting experiments on how to collect the energy and beam it down. Europe, at this point, has integrated space-based solar power into their net zero 2050 energy strategy. It's now part of what they're thinking is how can we detach ourselves from oil and even look at energy coming from space.
Yeah, because if we look at the geopolitics of today's world, one might be able to draw the dots between our need for fossil fuels and what's happening geopolitically. Going back to what you said in the 1960s, we had the space race, we had the US, we had Russia. That was competition. Do you think competition or collaboration is the best way to go about resources?
There will always be competition, but you can make it into a healthy competition. But at some point it's going to create tensions. And you started seeing it now. Everybody's talking about going to the moon. Why the moon? Well, because you have two poles. You have China and the United States, and the United States with all of its allies. And they all want to go to the same place, and they all want to extract the resources. That brings competition, but also tension, geopolitical tension. That's why it's important to look at the topic of resources, not just from technology or science point of view, but also the legal, the policy, the environmental, even the ethical issues, because this is going to be an area of competition that at some point is going to create interesting tensions.
And then for all of the wonderful people that work with you, who are lucky enough to be taught by you, hear you speak, or literally are around the Colorado region, Colorado School of Mines, which is so very, very famous and brilliant in what you do there. How do you manage to train their minds to think about all of these different things? Because truly, it is a pioneering frontier stage, and it's a stage of development, space law being a massive part of this as well, where the technology is moving in one way. We see it with AI as well. We've got different rates of movement. Technology is moving in some capacity, some is very, very fast.
Yeah.
The law takes more time because it needs a different length of time of consideration, and it needs the buy-in of nations, which is not there yet either. And then, but back to the main point of my question, how do you train a person who's going to become a deep expert to continue to have the lateral vision?
I've been lucky to be involved in this field for more than 25 years, first from the research point of view. At that point, it was sort of a science fiction type of thing. But in the last 10 to 15 years, this field has exploded because of the realization of how resources can enable science, commercial activities, and the like. So when we decided to start educating people on this, either through our program at Colorado or professional courses throughout the world, we realized that this is a very multidisciplinary area. You cannot just concentrate on science and technology. You have to concentrate on, does this make economic sense? Is this legal? Is this feasible from the point of view of policy? What are the implications of going after resources in other places, just like it has happened on Earth? So what we've been trying to teach our students is to look at it from a very global point of view. Even if we have PhD focusing on some obscure area of science, they need to understand that at some point, where do you fit in this whole thing? What are the implications for defense? Some people may not even want to be involved in things like that, but they have to realize this is part of the field. And that's why it's important to address the very interdisciplinary nature of resource.
And it's also you mentioned defense, and I'm thinking about the proliferation of satellites, for example, in various layers of orbits above us right now, literally
Yes.
above us right now,
Yes.
and which we're using for all sorts of different reasons. There is a sustainability issue, and I'm only mentioning that word because engineering, by design, when things are going to land on the moon, they have to consider what is the end point of this design. And of course, another resource, as you said, is tangible, intangible, but all of these things around you, they are tangible resources.
Yes.
And so what happens, what are the current laws? If you get something to the moon, what are the current laws for how they end up?
Yes. Interesting when this renewal of interest on space resources, the concept of resources has been around since the beginning of the space age. From the very beginning, we realized, look, if you want to send things to Earth, from Earth to space, it's extremely energy intensive, extremely expensive. Look at any rocket. Could be the Saturn V, could be the Artemis rocket, could be the SpaceX. 90% of that thing is fuel to send that little tiny 10%. And it's just too expensive. And we don't do things here on Earth. So we realized, okay, we're going to need resources from space. And so when that started happening, about 10 years ago, when we realized this is the next phase of space. In fact, I call it going from adolescence to maturity of space. Then we realized, well, we're going to have to deal with some interesting legal issues because we have the Outer Space Treaty that talks about benefit of all humankind. You cannot own any celestial bodies. But what does it mean in reality? And interestingly, the law, which we tend to think it moves very slowly, has been moving probably even faster than technology.
Which is highly unusual.
It is highly unusual. And you will hear from other experts in the field and from the United Nations that they're about to give us some guidelines next year at the 60th anniversary of the Outer Space Treaty of how to go about doing this in a legal point of view. And people are going to ask, well, what can you do in terms of law? How are you going to enforce this? Well, space is so important and so broad that if we don't follow certain rules of the road, we're all going to lose. Yes, you can say a country may go crazy and start doing things in a way that is going to harm. It's going to come and haunt them immediately. We destroy all of our assets and everybody's out of the picture. So we're going to have to abide by those rules that the United Nations is going to give us very soon. And eventually, it's good to have that because now we can start advancing with some certainty. All right, this is the way we're going to behave. Now let's start moving in terms of where are we going to go? How are we going to access those resources? And so those things have to move at the same pace.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing we do have is we have a knowledge of history and we have the possibility to design the vision together. But not everybody has signed up to the UN's vision, for instance. And then when we do have the vision laid out, not everybody respects the rules.
Correct. In fact, there are two poles now, two clubs. There's this thing called the Artemis Accords. It's the United States saying, We're going to go to the moon. Who wants to play with us? Now you started with 9 countries. Now you got 64 countries saying, let's play by the rules. But on the other side, you have China and Russia and 13 countries saying, let's do it our own way. But if you look at them, the principles are the same. They all want the same thing. It's just who you are going to associate with. But we are very aware that we have to do it in a way that everybody benefits from something like this.
And so when it comes to space resources, what do you think will be the first ones that will be extractable?
Yes. Okay, what is going to be of benefit? Like I said, there's some intangible resources. There's space stations where you have low gravity, vacuum. These are things that are hard to replicate here on Earth.
But that's also very important. Let's start with that then, the intangible.
Yeah.
The intangible resources, I mean, they're not nothing.
No, solar energy may be the ultimate use of resources. If we can beam power from Earth, forget about everything else.
But that intangible resource requires resources.
Correct.
To operate.
Absolutely. Then you have this environment that you have on space stations where you can create products that have better products because low gravity vacuum gives us that opportunity.
And maybe let's just pause there for a moment because, again, opening it up to other industries that may not have associated themselves with space in the past. I know pharma companies are using these microgravity arenas, like on the space station, agri-food areas as well. So there's lots of other pillars of society that are using.
You can create fiber optics cable, that is the one that we use for communications on Earth, at a much better properties in space than on Earth. Implants, nervous system implants, bone implants that can be brought to Earth and can be used for whatever we use here. So those are some of the intangible things. Even trash. For 60 years, we have sent all sorts of trash to space, the space debris. Instead of just burning in the atmosphere, why not recycling? Recycling is a resource. We use it here on Earth.
Sorry, explain that one to me. You're going to bring trash to space to recycle it up there. This sounds horribly expensive.
Well, I don't know how it works in Europe, but in the United States, every week there's a truck that picks up the trash from my home that can recycle aluminum, glass, and the like. Yeah. For 60 years, these rockets that we have sent, that they're destroyed, those things keep floating in space for years. And it's becoming a problem because they bump into our space assets and that becomes an issue. So the only way to get rid now of them is just burn them down on the atmosphere. Send them down, it burns, and then nothing falls down. Why not grab that piece that we already have spent probably thousands of dollars to put them into space and extract the aluminum, the titanium, use it as a structure or construction material? That's a resource. And we don't tend to think about it that way. Beyond that, then we're not going to the moon. And it's not about gold or platinum. Basic survival, oxygen to breathe, water to drink, water that you can split into hydrogen and oxygen, the most energetic propellant that you can make. Metals, you're going to need your aluminum, your iron that we use in space. The mere soil of the moon could be construction material. Don't bring with you your bricks and mortar to construct things. It's so expensive. Use the stuff that is there.
The regolith, as we call it. So right then, I've heard different figures being mentioned to me through the course of this conference and over the years. When do you think there will be a base on the moon?
Interesting enough, it's not science and engineering, it's a political will to do that. And you see it right now. The U.S. is announcing that by the end of the decade, there's going to be a base on the moon. The Chinese are doing the same thing. And just like in the 60s, it was about getting to the moon. Now it's about building sustained presence there. So if the political will is there, the technology will follow very closely. So by the end of this decade, as they're saying, it's very probable that we can be there.
And do you know where the Chinese or the Americans might place their base on the moon?
Interesting enough, the moon is big, and you see it every night. But just like on Earth, there's prime real estate. Just like in Luxembourg, you have certain areas that are more important than others. The poles of the moon have this unique appeal because the moon rotates in such a way that the rays of the sun are pretty oblique. So you always will see the sun on the horizon going up, and that's like living on the upper parts of Norway or Sweden. But what that gives you is light and power for more than 90% of the time. Whereas if you're in the equator, it's 2 weeks of darkness and 2 weeks of light. So you got power. You can communicate with Earth more than 90% of the time. You're close to places where resources may be present, like water ice on permanently shallow regions. So that's prime real estate. So when you put it all down, it's just a few places that are worth going to, and that's where the competition is going to be.
So do you think we might have by the end of the decade, and by the end of the decade, you mean 2030 or 2040?
So by the end of the 2020s, by the beginning of 2030s, there's going to be probably the start, not a complete base, at least a place where humans can go repeatedly for weeks, for months. And once that starts happening, is that, okay, how are they going to breathe? Well, they can bring their oxygen in the water, but does it make sense at the lowest, $100,000 a kilogram to put something on the moon? Does it really make sense? Or if it's there, why not live off the land? And so that's when you start thinking, okay, we need oxygen, we may need water, we may need construction material, roads, habitats, berms. And then you start building your base in a way that now you can make it permanent.
Right. Before we get to that, you mentioned the competition. I'm thinking now, you mentioned China and the US, of course. Do you see a moon situation where one will be at one pole, one will be at the other pole?
Everybody's saying, why going to the South Pole? It just turned out that we have more information about the South Pole than the North Pole, but both of them are the same. They have the same illumination, they have the same access to resources. Some may decide to go to the North Pole, some of them decide
But then
to
are we not setting up another situation on the moon geopolitically, which is not cohesive?
Well, the thing is, you also have to be realistic. And even though China and the US and some countries are competing, they also realize, well, how about using common infrastructure? We're going to need power. We're going to need communications. We may buy services from one another, just like we do here on Earth. Even if we're competing, everybody uses GPS that comes from China or comes from Europe or comes from the US. We all use the same infrastructure, so there may be some advantage of being in the same place. Now, that introduces also tensions between pure science and the actual use of resources. Scientists are saying, in the search for resources, we may spoil the environment. So why not science be done on the North Pole and the other ones? And who knows? There may be different reasons why we do that. It's not just geopolitical. It's also about certain places that are more important than others.
And then we haven't even mentioned asteroids. Asteroids is another kind of a whole other sphere of conversation and potential.
We are all talking about the moon, but the asteroids hold important resources. They also have water. They also have some metals that are important. And interesting enough, even though they're farther away, they're easier to reach from the point of view of energy. It's not the distance, it's the energy that it takes for a rocket to get to an asteroid that is lower because they're smaller, they don't have as much gravity, you don't have to slow down to get there and waste some fuel. So they're also important. It's just that in terms of priorities or where we're going to go first, let's take one step at a time. Let's go to a place that is 3 days away, test our systems, if everything works fine, let's keep going further.
3 days away. I mean, I'm thinking you're originally from Mexico and you live in Colorado. Yeah, it takes you pretty much 1 day to get to Luxembourg. So
that's right.
Going in a different
that's
direction.
Right, yeah.
When you say it in times of days.
Yeah.
So then with all of your knowledge and all of the people you've dealt with, what kind of message would you like to give, first of all, to the industry? A message to the industry people, you know, and when I say industry, it's a business, it might be a startup company, it might be a large agency, and it might be somebody who is just a student coming into this field. What would you like to give them as a message that's important to consider?
That we're entering is very, very seldom that you have a chance to be in a totally new field, like AI or the internet a few years ago. This is new. And so in terms of opportunities, everybody's seeing the near term. Well, we can get some water or solar-based, space-based solar power. But think about what can come after this. Some people may say, well, there's not a business case now. Yeah, but what happens later? Think about in history, how people thought about railroads and airplanes and nuclear energy and biotechnology and lasers, even at the start of the space age. Why are we going to space? And now we're all using it. What comes after? What are the possibilities? We don't even know what are the possibilities. But so let's open up the field. Let's start using the resources, and then things will come later. In fact, space resources are not going to be this fancy discovery of a moon, of a planet, or the black hole. They're actually going to be a very mundane operation. Just like on Earth, if I tell you that this thing has lanthanum or lithium or some exotic material, you don't care. You just want it to work, so you can call, you text message. Same thing in space. Resources are going to be not a fancy discovery, but they're going to be running underneath everything that we do there. They're going to serve for exploration, for commercial activities. Let's get that. Let's get the infrastructure, and let's see where this leads.
I think that's a very strong message. And then the other question I have to you really is I kind of put us all into this pool of a normal person. For people who are not living in this world that you inhabit and you're such a great voice in, which voices of conversation should we have in the fold? Which voices and thoughts do we not have at the table yet? At your round table in Colorado, who is not there that should be there?
Yes, it's important to not isolate yourself with experts in the field. This has repercussions to everybody, to the billions of people that inhabit this planet. They understand so well how resources are important to them every day. They may not think that happens in space, but they're already connected. They wake up every day and they see if it's going to snow or not. They're going to see where they're going. They know the time. They go into communications. So they have to understand that the same thing that we've done here on Earth is going to be useful in space. The important thing is they're going to enable not just space exploration, but commercial activities. And that means jobs, that means new opportunities. We're starting to integrate space into the global economy. We tend to think about space in the way the Greeks looked at it. This place where it's pure, it's perfect, incorruptible. We're going to expand our presence, and we have to understand that it's just going to become part of everything we do on Earth. The important thing is that we're just starting to do it. And let's learn what we have done here on Earth. All the benefits that we have gotten from the resources, but also the bad things that have come along. Let's try, as we start from scratch, to do it not just in an effective, scientific, and technologically perfect way, but also in a fair, in a responsible, and a sustainable way. And what I mean by sustainability is the three pillars: economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, and social sustainability. Because it's going to affect all of us here on Earth, not just the ones that are going to go to space. And so let's be resourceful about it and make the best and see how that's going to affect all of us. Because we're driven by our survival. Let's forget about exploration. It's all about how we as a species are going to survive. Resources are going to play a very important role.
Angel, thank you for all of the work that you do, and thank you for giving us some of your very, very precious time. Your time is a very precious resource, and I'm deeply grateful for it. Thank you for coming to Luxembourg every year and also leading the professional course
I got to
here.
tell you one thing, Lisa. When you're talking about how other people in the field have to understand things about it, you have become an expert on space resources just by
absorbing what you tell me.
So let's expose people to this type of information.
Well, it's true. I mean, if I can come into the field a number of years ago and listen and absorb and imbibe all of your brilliance, then anybody can. And actually just throwing that back to you, I care about it so much because I can see how connected to our normal everyday world it is. And I feel we really need to invest in our own self-education because otherwise we can't be at the table.
And we're grateful of having somebody like you that is trying to communicate this to the public.
Thank you so much, Angel. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Oh, that's so kind of you. Thank you.